Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, how you doing tonight?
Doing all right. I've got like a different thing to record every single night of the week, which is a thing I guess I have to do now. But at least this one is the labor of love. Everything else is like a job.
Aw, you hear that, everyone? He cares about you. He doesn't care about Ben Natan. He cares about you.
Oh, yeah, I guess I am also recording that this week, too. Yeah, I suppose I like the show. I'm still out on Ben Natan, but I suppose I like doing that show.
Personally, not sure, but that's funny. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Apologies for not appearing on an episode about 2 weeks ago, when we would normally have released. Obviously, with everything that was going on in the city of Minneapolis, city of St. Paul, and later across the country, that it didn't seem as important for us to be talking about Minnesota Vikings news and cooking, let's be honest, as everything else going on. So if you were a Patreon subscriber, you did receive an additional episode and an additional little clip show, and then we just gave everyone access to the one that I'd given out to Patreon back in January. So hope you enjoyed all 2 hours of jokes that were dated in January. Hope you guys appreciate that. Welcome to this episode, and just wanted to make a quick mention that before we begin, and sort of along those lines, if you would like to donate to a couple of organizations in the Minneapolis area that are helping kind of clean up and get things a bit back to normal as far as Lake Street is concerned, you can go to welovelakestreet.com. They are accepting donations both via PayPal and credit card. What was strange to me, and not to go off on a rant about the riots and everything, was watching my old neighborhood in St. Paul, which was the Midway neighborhood, burned down while I was sitting 4 hours away, just watching that on CNN. That was really weird. I'm not hearing a lot
anytime like a local thing is on CNN, and then you also add, hey, I'm very familiar with that local thing, and then you also add, oh, it's burning.
Yeah.
There's a lot. It's a lot, right?
Yeah, exactly. So just watching that was a bit crazy. I couldn't. It was odd. Just going, oh, I remember that store and that restaurant and that restaurant and that new part of that wasn't there when I was there. Oh, poor Turf Club. But again, just wanted to quick mention that for those of you who are outside of the Twin Cities area and would like to donate to something helping the Minneapolis, the area is affected by kind of everything going on, which is a hard segue into our Patreon, but damn it, I'm going to do it anyway. If you enjoy the show and would like to hear additional content like we'll be providing today, where we're going to be discussing a little bit of outside things, which ranged apparently from a discussion on COVID to the world's greatest Yelp review, you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode, and we will have a bonus episode in addition to this episode, which will also be available. So if you are interested in such things, you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and access the bonus episodes. Once you sign in and once you donate to the show, you get access to every bonus episode we've ever done. So if you would like that, you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and provide us with Tree Fitty to help keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay. It's been a little bit of time since I've done this. I'm starting to trip up on my words. This isn't a good thing. Also, I'm totally out of practice. I should have been doing calisthenics or something for this. But anyway, so if you would like to do that, you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode, or you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well. And both these things go directly to us and help us keep the helps pay for new microphones, helps pay for new equipment when it fails, helps us be snarky to each other as often as we can, because you guys are helping pay for the show. So again, thank you guys so much. Have a couple of donations to quick mention via PayPal. Just a quick thank you to Margie Lozer. Again, thank you, Margie, so much. We also have 2 new Patreon subscribers as well. We have AJ Askew and Father Aaron Kuhn, which he clarifies in his note here. Quote, love the podcast. It has been my favorite for Vikings-related analysis for several years. Question, when Zimmer became head coach, it seemed like it took 2 years for the defense to fully adopt his system. And the defensive backs, like Xavier Rhodes and Trey Waynes, needed a year or more to become dominant at their positions. Can we expect this year's new crop of cornerbacks to form a top 10 or top 5 defensive backfield, or will it take at least a year? Father Aaron, yes, I am a Catholic priest.
Thanks for clarifying. I think that there's a pretty good chance that we'll see some rookie struggles. It also, if we think that the trend is going to continue, it would also mean that Mike Hughes is coming into his own because this is his 3rd year in the system, although, who knows kind of how much missing time due to injury impacts those things. That is certainly a possibility. My guess, though, is that the defense is going to simplify just because of the number of new faces in that secondary, and that simplification should make things a little bit easier for all the new faces to kind of catch on to what's happening, especially because the nickel position will probably be occupied by a completely new face, unless, of course, it's Mike Hughes, who does have that ability to switch inside. So it is going to be a bit, I think, before those cornerbacks start to take shape. Even before Zimmer arrived at the Vikings, the cornerbacks that he worked with in Cincinnati also took some time after the rookie year to kind of come into their own. I don't know that they'll form even a top 10 defensive backfield, even though you've got Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris back there. It might take at least a year, possibly longer. I do like Jeff Gladney. I expect Holton Hill to start, so I do like him. And he's got, more experience in the system too. So it is, certainly within the realm of possibility that they kind of don't miss a beat. But I would expect certainly some struggles early on.
Well, thank you again, Father Aaron Kuhn, for helping us out on Patreon. So the big news out of the Vikings was not the return to I'd say Winter Park, but the return to Egan, and it wasn't really anything involving the NFL repositioning itself as far as the protests go with Colin Kaepernick. The big news of the Vikings this last week involved Dalvin Cook, who has decided to hold out. And in a way, this almost is comforting because of all the things that we expected in 2020, this was one of them. So in a way, this is a return to normalcy, and thank God for that, because at this point, I could use something that I expected. So what is the big chasm between what he wants and what the Vikings appear to be offering?
Yeah, it is apparently quite a large chasm. I saw one report that said he wanted $16 million. I don't believe it. But Chad Graff, my colleague at The Athletic, reported that the Cook team is looking for something in the range of David Johnson, which is about $13 million a year. The Vikings, and this was actually a pleasant surprise for me to see, is looking for something in the range of $8 million a year, which is significantly lower than I would have expected. I don't think they'll get there. And when the Vikings kind of leak contract details, they very often get very close to what they want. And the most recent test case for this is the Kyle Rudolph deal, where some of the details were leaked out, presumably by members of the Vikings, about the deal that Kyle Rudolph was saying no to. And, people got up in arms, and it was kind of weird because the leaked details didn't include anything like guarantees, right? So if Rudolph signs on to this really generous looking deal and then gets cut after 1 year with no guaranteed money, he would have been right to say no. But the Vikings did actually end up getting an approximate average value close to what ended up being leaked in the first place. And so even though there was a lot of negotiating and posturing, the average value was about where the Vikings leaked. And I remember this happening in the past. I think that they ended up leaking something like that for Eric Kendricks, although that wasn't a protracted negotiation or anything like that. So that was pretty easy to lock up. I don't know. The Vikings do tend to get what they want. This is a pretty wide chasm. I would imagine that as the two sides get closer, we'll probably see a deal signed before training camp. They tend to do these things. Remember, the Stephon Diggs deal was signed right before training camp. I think the Eric Kendricks deal was signed before training camp. So these are things that I wouldn't be that concerned about. Even if they're the kind of person that thinks that Dalvin Cook is really essential to the offense, just because I don't know that Cook can credibly make the claim that he's got a really fantastic market elsewhere, and then he also doesn't really have the capability to hold out without losing an accrued season and becoming like a restricted free agent or something like that, based on how the CBA is restructured. And I would absolutely not want to be a player heading into free agency next year when there's the potential for the salary cap to go down a lot. So there's a lot of reasons that the Vikings have leverage.
Yeah, and considering the fact that, and this is almost a situation of not being able to read the room, you're looking for wiggle room in a place, in a place where there's not, but B, even if they had the wiggle room to offer it to you, this is uncomfortable for the Vikings, to say the least, because the league is talking about not even just the NFL, but even baseball, which is doing a horrendous job, by the way, at handling returning back to work, is
really
talking,
bad.
yeah, Hall of Fame worthy terrible. But teams are talking about the amount of revenue that they're looking at losing, whether it just starting at the fact that likely fans aren't going to be in the stadium for a number of games. So they are talking about how this affects everything, and it's going to eventually lead to the salary cap, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm kind of curious because how teams handle this is obviously going to be fairly critically important, or how the NFL handles it's going to be critically important, because my estimation is that the total amount of money paid out is going to decrease, but everybody's salary will be prorated down. So it's not as if teams will have to restructure every single deal that they have of the players they have on the roster. Like, there'll be 40 odd deals before you hit free agency, in order to make everyone fit underneath the cap. Like, that's not likely going to be what the NFL forces. My guess is that everybody's salary is going to be ratcheted down by a percentage, and then that percentage will be what gets applied against the cap. And it also kind of depends on what is used to calculate the cap. So from my understanding, it's mostly TV revenue. And if that doesn't go down at all, this isn't much to talk about. So if gate receipts, if tickets are part of that, I would imagine, losing 60,000 per stadium, 60,000 tickets per stadium for all 32 teams for 8 games a season. That's obviously significant, but it is not it's not the vast majority of the revenue. And so I saw an estimation that the salary cap will go down by 40%. If we still get all 16 games, I would not imagine that it goes down by 40%. And it's really just kind of a question of what proportion of gate receipts are a part of the salary cap calculation. And I have to imagine it's not as big as TV revenue. So that's kind of an interesting question. The estimation of revenue lost, I think, had more to do with games lost. But again, I don't know. We'll see. I could be very wrong here. I'm kind of shooting off the hip here, so I don't super know everything about this. But my initial estimation was that it was mostly based off of TV revenue. So that is a concern. But when it comes to things like the salary cap, I mean, I would just hate to attempt to leverage next year's free agency as a means of negotiating right now. It just seems like the worst possible position. And Dalvin Cook is certainly going to be the person that's going to be kind of the test case for that. The The thing is, I mean, obviously he'd rather strike a deal now just because the signing bonus money he's going to get is just going to be pure cash that he's just going to be able to get. And then it'll be prorated down in base salary and stuff like that. But the fact of the matter is that he's going to have to leverage what his future free agency is going to look like against that. And the Vikings know that whatever he gets in signing bonus money next year is probably going to be less than the signing bonus he'd get if he signed now, even if the Vikings offer him, some sort of Garbo deal. Maybe that's all wrong. Maybe they'll find out some solution to get the players the money that they kind of thought they deserved. But it's difficult to figure out how to adjust accounting for when there is like an unexpected event like a pandemic, and then you've got two very kind of powerful interests in the players union and the NFL. And obviously one's a little bit more powerful than the other, given kind of how negotiations have gone for the past 60 years. So it's going to be tough to figure out.
And I cannot imagine being a free agent in the NFL this season. Like of all time, like this season and possibly next season are probably two of the worst years you could have done that in the history of free agency. So you're going to find yourself in all sorts of interesting spots, and agents will be trying to refer back to, well, this is the way that things have been going. This is the step ladder of how things progress. And teams are going to have to sit down and go, yeah, but that's not what we can do anymore. And
right. Yeah.
That'll be all sorts of fun. So the question becomes, Dalvin Cook has said he's not going to be involved in any team activities until the contract situation is resolved. Obviously, there are very successful backups, very competent backups that the Vikings have access to and have under contract. Does that mean that it's less likely that the Vikings are going to push to try to get this done? Or is it something that Dalvin, because of how good he was last year, the Vikings have are more likely to try to speed this sort of thing up?
I think the Vikings think that Dalvin Cook is a very critical part of their offense. Again, it's not something that I necessarily kind of hold myself to.
You're still a belief in defunding the running back position, I know.
Yeah, right. Not quite abolish. I'm a dirty compromiser in that way, but defund running backs. But yeah, the thing is, like, I don't know that Michael Boone is the kind of person that you feel confident in saying, he's going to be part of the solution if Dalvin Cook can't go. I really like having him on the team. I think he provides a lot. I think if you asked this question last year, you'd be taking a look at Mike Boone and Alexander Mattison, who was a rookie at the time, so we didn't have a ton of information about how he do in the NFL. But we had an understanding that maybe he was a goal line option. And you'd say you'd probably have a duo here, right? Where you've got a guy that you're a little bit more comfortable in the passing game and a guy you're a little bit more comfortable in short yardage. And you'd say you'd kind of have to bootstrap something. And then, hey, maybe you picked up this Amir Abdullah guy from the Lions and he might be able to fill in. And you'd say you'd be kind of reasonably comfortable. Well, now I think that we've got a full season of Dalvin Cook, or close to a full season as you'll get with him. I think you could probably be a little bit more comfortable just because, Madison showed that he could be kind of an every down running back. He's got the capability to burst a little bit. Obviously, he doesn't finish runs. He's not going to get you an 80-yard touchdown or anything like that. But he seems to be able to burst to 8, 10, 12 yards on a somewhat regular basis, which is, I think more than a lot of people expected. Plus, he's got, the ability to hurdle defenders and stuff like that, which is great. And then you've got Michael Boone as a supplement. I think that you've got a pretty reasonable replacement situation with them and then Amir Abdullah, so long as he can kind of clean up his fumbles. That's a group of players that you're kind of comfortable saying, hey, if we don't have Dalvin Cook, we can go. But I just think that behind them, you'd kind of want a more capable or proven running back than Tony Brooks-James, who is just like not, he's been, I think, with 3 teams, or maybe this is his 3rd team. He's just not the kind of running back whose history will tell you that you're crazy comfortable with him playing. Mind you, the Chiefs thought that about Damian Williams, and he burned the Vikings for a huge run, so who knows? But for the most part, I would want one other running back in some way. And I don't know that Brooks James is that guy. The Vikings, per usual, have 2 fullbacks at camp. They've got C.J. Ham and then Jake Vargas. normally you'd always kind of bet on whatever the practice squad fullback is, just to kind of like what CJ Ham was when he replaced, what was it, Zach Line? There might have been someone in between. But now that CJ Ham has signed a new deal, I think he's just going to be kind of the favorite there. And you could ask him to kind of replace some runs, but I don't think you would. So yeah, I think that you can do without Dalvin Cook given that running back core. But I think as soon as you have a single injury, then you're in kind of this weird spot, which is not where you want to be. I would feel more comfortable if I were the Vikings finding another running back that feels like that they can play in case this Dalvin Cook holdout continues. And maybe you'll find that guy on waivers, right? Like once training camp ends and if there's still a holdout for some reason, somebody's going to get cut and you're going to be like, hey, that guy can start. We like him more than Brooks James. Maybe we'll add him until Cook comes back. So yeah, I think I like the Vikings stable of running backs to replace Cook if push comes to shove, which I don't think it will. I just don't love the fragility of the position at that point.
And plus, the other thing that can end up happening as a result of this is, look what ended up happening to Melvin Gordon, who thought he had all of the he had all the leverage in the world, and he ended up getting nothing out of the Chargers and ended up signing somewhere else for even less than what the Chargers were offering. So there is a significant gamble going on here for a running back who has had, I don't even know if you could say last year was a completely healthy season, but I think it was probably his most healthy season out of 3 years, which is rough. And, injuries aren't necessarily the player's fault, but it's tough when you get labeled as injury prone like he has. But it is difficult, and it should be interesting to see what ends up kind of going on past this. But this, again, we had called this in January. We had called this in December that this was coming. So, if nothing else, it is nice to see that that the Swallows are returning to California. Like this is what we anticipated completely. So it was this, and it was our entire backfield of corners going away. So, yay.
Yeah, we were right. Hooray.
Yay for being right about things we wish we weren't right about. Awesome. Well, let's move on from Dalvin Cook, because whether or not he gets his money is not something that we're going to be able to find out in June or I'm guessing not even in July. But the teams are beginning to return to their facilities. I don't even know if Dallas and Houston are actually returning to their facilities now, considering that a few players, including Ezekiel Elliott, apparently, have tested positive for COVID-19. What is the status of returning to Egan and getting things underway for like rookie OTAs and all that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of changes that seem like they're likely to go into effect. And the team and the NFL has already published guidelines for teams on what a return will look like. So the first is probably going to have to be a negotiation between the NFL and NFLPA about a potential earlier reporting date for all players, so that everybody can get acclimated to football again, right? Because we haven't had on-field work this offseason. So veterans typically report to camp 2 weeks prior to the first preseason game. That might change. And then also that gives you the opportunity to have kind of the same virtual isolation period. But the thing that's really important is that there's like 3 tiers of interaction in team facilities. So how essential you are to the team operation essentially kind of determines what tier you're in. And that determines kind of who interacts with who. So tier 1, players, coaches, and employees whose jobs require direct contact with the players, like athletic trainers. Tier 2 will be for essential staff members who need access to restricted areas, like front office staff, including the general manager and video staff. And then tier 3 will be for employees, stadium, and event staff members who will be cordoned off from players. So restricted areas are locker rooms, practice fields, stadium fields, and sidelines, athletic training rooms, player dining areas, player lounges, and the weight room. So tier 1, you interact with, you either are a player or you interact with the players in those areas. Tier 2, you can go into those restricted areas after players and other Tier 1 personnel have left. And then Tier 3, you don't get to go into those restricted areas, and you're cordoned off from interacting with players. And that is apparently one method by which they'll reduce the potential for contact between people. The thing that's really interesting to me, they've banned buffets. They're replaced by prepackaged meals. Meal times are staggered, so smaller groups eat. Locker rooms, whenever possible, locker rooms should be reconfigured to provide 6 feet of space between stalls. And with 90 players on a training camp roster, that's going to be tough. Even the newest facilities like the Vikings, I've been in that locker room. Putting 6 feet of space between lockers is going to be real tough. I would imagine that there's going to be a supplemental locker room or something like that. I'm kind of curious about this because the players will still be like in huddles and also like hitting each other in camp. Like, I don't know that 6 feet of space in a locker room is going to do it. I don't know what the meeting rooms are going to look like. Maybe they'll be spaced apart, but I can't imagine that if one player has the coronavirus, and even if they're asymptomatic, I can't imagine that this will prevent them from passing it to somebody else because, like, you have to hit each other. You have to make contact on a field. So I don't know how effective this will be, but keeping the groups isolated is going to be a thing. And then I don't actually know if media are going to end up being at training camp until we've got protocol for what media is going to look like, until we've got maybe a better understanding of what the trajectory of the virus is. I don't know. There's a protocol for sanitizing shoulder pads, mouth guards, helmets. There's a COVID-19 education program for all players and essential employees. Only groups of fewer than 15 people will be allowed in the weight room at a time. All meetings with more than 20 people must be conducted remotely. No binders and printouts, which that's not new. Everybody basically has their playbook on iPads now. But yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that they have to do. I don't know that they can do anything to prevent player-to-player infection, but this would reduce somebody who's outside the bubble, like, say, me, if I was an asymptomatic or even a symptomatic carrier, from making it easy to transmit to anyone else. And then I imagine any press or the hold will either be done kind of digitally, which is what we've been doing, or done with a significant amount of space between the coach and the media so that we wouldn't kind of violate that bubble. Now, the interaction with like PR staff, I don't know if PR staff's going to interact with the coach or what that's going to look like, but there's probably going to be that. And then I wouldn't be surprised if entry into the building required one of those temperature scanners. They like scan your forehead and stuff like that. So we'll see. There's going to be a lot done. Tom Pelissero reported that they expect that there's going to be a high likelihood of there going to be a quick and accurate saliva test by then. That already exists. The question is whether or not, you've got a good false positive and a false negative rate. And I think right now the test is something like 90%. You want to get it up to 95% in terms of accuracy. So that's all part of it. I don't know. This is all like kind of fascinating.
The illusion of safety.
What's that?
It's the illusion of safety. Pure and simple. It's the illusion.
Mostly it's security theater, kind of like most of the stuff that they have you do on airplanes. Like, yeah, locking and hardening the cockpit, that dramatically increases safety, right? But like not allowing tweezers, like, okay. A lot of this is the illusion of safety. It's a lot of it's security theater.
Yeah, speaking as someone who, when I get back to work, is going to my job is going to be trying to figure out how to make it so that students aren't passing a disease through classrooms with one door for everyone to go in and out of. Yeah, this is all the illusion. This is all the illusion of safety. It is fantastic. I can't wait for the fall, man. this is ridiculous. So eventually, in theory, football is planning on returning, unlike baseball, who are full of morons. Do you realize how? Have you been desperate enough to watch the Korean baseball stuff yet?
No, actually, I haven't.
People you haven't? You've missed it. The Korean baseball thing, for those of you who have missed it, is fantastically just like, you're sitting there watching it, just like, you know, the game. The game is ostensibly the same, but the stuffed animals in the fan seats.
Oh, I have seen that. And then there was also a sex doll controversy too.
One of the, I believe it was, I could be wrong. I believe it was not the main league, but I think it was one of the farm leagues, had put adult companion models that they thought were just like dummies from like a store, and instead it turned out to be sex dolls, and they put them in the stands instead. I personally prefer the stuffed animals.
I mean, the stuffed animals are superior in every way, except I guess really one way. But but what's funny to me is that like I saw like the apology put out by the company that provided the sex dolls, and the apology was basically like, look, they asked for dolls, and we removed all the sexy parts. You can't have sex with these dolls by design. Like I'm sure they, you know, if you were committed enough, you could find a way. But the dolls were not enabled for sex, I guess, was the excuse. I don't know. That's something I got to put in the show notes, because like that's a great. I hope this gets. I don't know.
That if I didn't have something good already, that would be a fantastic episode name for the show. But yeah, the way that the Korean baseball thing is going, it's been fun to watch. Even just watching the replay at noon or whatever, it's been fun to watch. The teams have been pretty good. I live in a Dinos household because their mascot is amazing. Dusty was trying. So
we're not like isn't there a Twins too? Are we not obligated to support the Twins?
No. Have you seen the picture of the mascot for the Dinos?
I have seen the dinosaur. I understand.
That is why. That is, we are a Dinos household. I have Twins shirts, hats, whatever. The kids that are into baseball are into the Twins, but no. This is not a Twins household. This we worship at the feet of that swole dino, and that's all there is to it. But like, it's been fun to watch, and it's been entertaining. It's been a nice distraction. And if you are a compulsive gambler, I imagine you are enjoying the Korean Baseball League a considerable amount. But
that explains it. I've never gambled in my life.
Oh, that does explain it, actually. I forgot. I thought you were some sort of a degenerate,
No, you must be thinking of someone completely different.
Yeah, I must have been thinking of Dusty. All right. Well, anyway, point of the story. Tell Dusty I called him a degenerate on the podcast. But anyway, it's been fun to watch watching what's been happening to Major League Baseball, just watching that completely fall apart between the owners and the players. And you can't fault the players for this. I firmly believe you cannot fault the baseball players for going, so can we get a schedule? Can we figure what's going out here? And the owners going, we're losing too much money. We have to start now. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, so this is kind of like my deal on the NFL restarting. I think they'll find a way, right? Like, there are billionaires that
you can do so much better of a Jeff Goldblum impression, and that's what you roll out with. D-. I
wasn't even thinking of Jeff. I was just like, yeah, they'll do it.
The NFL
I wasn't even
finds a way. There, that's all you needed to do.
The NFL finds a way.
Excellent. Our listeners are quite pleased. Remember, patreon.com/Norse Code for this and other great material. And the other big thing coming out of the NFL now is they have decided to do a bit of an about face on the whole Colin Kaepernick situation. And while, and just as a bit of a thing, this isn't a political podcast. If you're looking for such a thing, you can find Arif's work at Wide Left. This is more just a I guess a business aspect of it. Like the NFL has decided and has been quoted basically as such, encouraging teams to sign Colin Kaepernick, saying that they finally get why he was. They finally get why he was kneeling. They finally understand that it had nothing to do with anything involving the flag. It instead had to do with police brutality, which all you needed to do was open your eyes briefly and you could tell that's what it was about. It had nothing to do with the flag. But the NFL is now encouraging teams to sign Colin Kaepernick.
I don't know what that means, though, right? They could just say that's what they're doing.
Right? No, that's all they need to do. That's all they need to do is just say, we encourage people to do it. If memory serves, didn't he have a lawsuit where he was trying to convince people that the NFL was colluding against him doing it? So maybe this is their mea culpa. No. I know that we were colluding before. We're definitely not anymore. Please, somebody do it. Jets, look in your direction.
Yeah, it would be really funny. And the NFL is really dumb, but they're not this colossally dumb. We'll see. But it would be really funny if they said that they were encouraging teams, and then in the process of discovery for a lawsuit, emails revealed that they were also back channeling teams saying, absolutely do not do this.
See, and so here's the thing. And a lot of people have mentioned that the Vikings should sign Colin Kaepernick as some sort of a symbol, or some sort of hey, working with the community. This is our way of showing that this is how we as an organization, we as a city can move, all that crap. And I say all that crap because I really do feel like it would be lip service. I have nothing against him personally. I have nothing against him as a quarterback. If he is a good second tier or good, if he's a good backup, great. If he's a good third on the depth chart quarterback, great. I really do feel like it is more of the circus, and I don't mean that in such a way as this is the negative attention that you're going to end up getting out of it. I mean that this turns into the Tebow syndrome. Are you going to be the team that signs him and then cuts him? Are you going to be the team that puts this on your quarterback, on your number one quarterback? Because people who aren't even really interested in the team are going to be, chance during the game, away games, home games. This is something that your quarterback is going to constantly be dealing with. And whether or not he ends up moving up the chart. And if this happened in Minnesota, is this a situation where it's anything more than lip service, or can you simply hire him as part of your organization as not necessarily a PR thing, but more as a humanitarian or outreach portion of your team, which the Vikings appear to be trying to do something similar, seeing as how that the players themselves, including I believe Danielle Hunter, were trying to express that all of these statements don't mean anything. We want to do more. So I guess the argument here is it worth bringing him in if it's just going to be lip service? And yes, we have him. Do you see him? He's in the cage over there. We have him here. He will be allowed to kneel, and we will all be allowed to kneel, and all that. Or do you do that to your? I'm not calling Kirk Cousins fragile, but I'm not calling Kirk Cousins ego fragile on that. Do you do that to your lead quarterback?
So this, I think, kind of reveals a fair amount about the team's professed ethos, which is, we'll do anything if it helps us win or whatever, which is not the case, right? Because I think signing Colin Kaepernick improves your odds of winning, even if he's, just a backup quarterback. And there's actually a pretty good piece of The Athletic that kind of breaks down Colin Kaepernick's year statistically that actually ended up being better than I thought. And I was somebody who made the claim that his 16-4 touchdown interception ratio was not a full assessment of his statistical play. I thought he played poorer than the 16-4 ratio would have you believe. I thought he played better than the 110 winning percentage would have you believe, and that he generally played slightly better than his like adjusted net yards per attempt, and so which was not that great. And so I considered him kind of a low end starter, high end backup based off of the year. But there's a really good piece at The Athletic that actually details that he might actually be an average or even above average starter, even if you only take a look at those final 2 years, because of how we progressed over the course of the year as he was recovering from injury and surgery. So that was something I had not considered, that he actually got better as over the course of the year. And then when you take a look at how Blaine Gabbert did when he was playing statistically versus how Colin Kaepernick did, Kaepernick was kind of a tier above him. And so they both had just these really, really poor supporting casts. So it's always difficult to evaluate what's happening with the quarterback. But actually, Kaepernick did substantially better, which you'd hope, right? Because Gabbert is terrible. So in either case, I think that he makes a pretty high-end backup. And I think it is unlikely that you'll find many teams that have better backups than him. Maybe the Bears, right? It depends on if Mitch Trubisky or Nick Foles is the backup, I suppose. But, maybe the teams that have drafted a rookie and plan to sit them for a little bit, like maybe Ryan Fitzpatrick is probably a better backup to Tua than Colin Kaepernick would be. But there's very, very few teams, right? And if teams say, all we care about is winning, you would have expected the team to have signed Colin Kaepernick by now. Now teams can say, hey, he hasn't played football for 4 years. Who knows? That obviously that didn't stop the Eagles from signing Michael Vick. But for the most part, they've got kind of a built-in football-related excuse. So now, if you're a team that signs Colin Kaepernick, I think you're probably insulated from cutting him, right? The only difference is if he performs really well in the preseason, the only time that you can really kind of genuinely see how a player is performing. And there's a bunch of stuff, how the preseason isn't indicative of how you're doing. And I think there's no better example of that than Kyle Sloter, who was just really incredible in the preseason. He had one of the best, I think, passer ratings of all time in the preseason. I think Sage Rosenfels and Kyle Sloter are like preseason gods in terms of statistics. But Sloter had a lot of issues in terms of the fundamentals that and how that would translate into pro level play, especially in terms of breaking down an offense and figuring out kind of what his read is. And so it's not going to be 100%, but if he plays really well in the preseason and he's not doing that other fundamental stuff, or if he's not running the offense the right way for whatever reason, and you want to cut him because of that, then you're in a really difficult spot. So that's kind of the issue. But I just feel like if you're an NFL coach and you feel like you've got a pretty good handle on how to control a locker room, you should just bite the bullet and do it, because there's only a risk that your team gets better. And if you've got a strong locker room, like I would imagine the Vikings, for example, have a pretty strong locker room, you can kind of weather that storm if you cut them. The Patriots are probably the best example of something like that. Now, they don't seem like the kind of team that would sign Colin Kaepernick, but they took a chance on Tebow. They decided no. The Jets took a chance on Tebow. They decided no. Now, obviously, with how the Jets kind of dealt with the remainder of their seasons, maybe Tebow would have been a good option. Who knows? But yeah, I don't. I don't see how you can say all we care about is winning and then not take on a controversial player. Like, clearly there's another thing here. And then you could say, hey, what about the locker room? What about this? What about distractions and stuff like that? And again, I think that that's kind of more of a reflection on a coach and a reflection on the rest of the locker room. If you don't feel like you've got a strong locker room, or if you feel like you're not a coach well suited to, well, if you feel like you're not coach well suited to that, maybe you shouldn't be coaching. But if you don't have like a strong locker room for whatever reason, maybe that kind of makes sense in your inability to handle quote unquote distractions. But like, teams handle quote unquote distractions really well all the time. And again, the Patriots are a really good example of this. Their like quarterback was like cheating, right? And it didn't matter. They like won a Super Bowl after that anyway, right? It just doesn't matter. Julian Edelman got popped for PEDs. Doesn't matter, right? It doesn't, right? And like, they got Darrelle Revis, who like, I wouldn't say he's a locker room cancer. In fact, I bet he's the opposite. But he's certainly not like a figure that is satisfied with the state of things, right? And so if you're constantly worried about having to pay Darrelle Revis, and he talks about his contract, what do you do? They got in Ocho Cinco, they got in Randy Moss, and they got rid of Randy Moss right as he fell off. Like they know how to win with this distracted locker room. So I don't really see why you can't handle just an outspoken player. Now, if you take a look at, again, that Athletic article, the locker room was divided on how they felt about Colin Kaepernick's protests, but according to reporting from people in San Francisco at the time, that is not the same as the locker room was like distracted or that the team's mission was kind of derailed as a result of Kaepernick's protests. So you will get people that might disagree, probably less now than before with Kaepernick. But that's not the same as you will get the kind of tension in a locker room that will erupt. I mean, the Vikings had to deal with Stephon Diggs and what you might call his antics or how he deals with the locker room or whatever, and what those distractions were. He intentionally missed a practice. He said he was sick, but the team didn't. And when you're sick, you tend to go to the team facility and report yourself sick, and then they kind of just say did not participate in practice due to illness. And the Vikings still made it, past one game of the playoffs, right? Like it's. If you're a good enough player, and I would argue that Kaepernick is, maybe, you don't do this for a backup, but, some teams even do this for a backup. The distraction angle is not that important. And when the distraction is, I care about the world and I want to make the world a better place, that's significantly less interesting, right? Of a distraction than say domestic violence. That's something where you're kind of worried about the moral state of your team. With Kaepernick, it's you might be offending people with the way that you participate in your protest, but it's very clearly coming from a place where you want to make the world a better place. Now, obviously, the pig socks and the Fidel Castro shirt, people can say that that's malicious, and maybe the pig socks are malicious. I think the Castro shirt very much comes down to what you think Castro represents. Obviously, a lot of Cubans in Florida were very upset about that. But I think Kaepernick just has a different view of Castro than them, right? For the most part, it comes from wanting to make the world a better place, which is not the same thing you could say for Adrian Peterson, right? That was pretty distracting, I would argue, and teams dealt with it. So that is just kind of a cop-out, and I think it kind of reveals that teams care about a little bit more than winning, but they'll couch it in these other terms. So that's how I feel about that end of it. The other end of it is if you're going to take on the risk of being the team that has to cut him or whatever, and you better have a good reason to cut him. I don't know. I guess I don't know. If you're the team that signs him, you probably are okay being the team that cuts him just from a PR standpoint. I mean, the Rams drafted Michael Sam and then he was cut and it didn't cause zero controversy when he was cut, but it certainly didn't cause a blow up or anything like that. And mostly my friends that don't follow football were oh, why was he cut? I thought he did really well. The report said he was doing really well in the preseason. And I could just say, well, yeah, the other guy that was vying for his job, I think it was Ethan Westbrooks, actually, who's still in the NFL, did even better in the preseason. So, who cares? That's just how it goes. And the Rams were given, essentially, a pass on that decision. The Jets, when they signed Tebow, I wouldn't say they were given a pass on cutting him, but that's because they're bad. But I don't think anyone said the Jets cut him for political reasons or whatever, because they wouldn't have signed him in the first place. And then the Patriots, everyone gave him a pass for cutting him because they're good, and so they probably made the right decision.
Well, yeah, the Patriots were given oh, okay, well, considering their history of evaluating character that doesn't end up in jail and whatever, okay, yep, if the Patriots say that he can't play, he probably can't play, and he should probably move on to baseball.
Right. So I just feel if you're the team that signs him, you get a lot of leeway on cutting him, unless he just blows you out of the water in the preseason, but not in the way the team wants. And now you've got this tension between, well, that doesn't translate, which is kind of a bizarre thing to say about somebody who, made an All-Pro squad. Oh, I don't know if he made an All-Pro squad that year, but drove people to the Super Bowl, and was phenomenal in the preseason. And I think the odds of that are actually quite low. That he'll blow up in the preseason and look like he's playing really well while not fulfilling the fundamental executive functions of the offense. I think straddling that line would be rare.
What would be, what team should pick him up? And I realize that everyone has an opinion of what team should pick them up, and they never seem to really align. But what team I feel should really pick him up is a team that doesn't have an identity whatsoever. And a team that is having trouble selling tickets, and a team that has trouble selling ticket licenses. And even if we're not...
You're thinking of the Chargers.
I am absolutely thinking of the Chargers. And if they end up, and if they sign him, then Easton Stick and no longer is a Charger and has to sign somewhere else, which then makes you happy because it's one less NDSU guy in the league.
No idea what you're talking about.
Of course not. I think the Chargers would be interesting for a number of reasons, but if you were looking at it for purely non-NFL reasons, you could do a hell of a lot worse.
And it would have been worse for the previous incarnation of the Chargers that were in San Diego, which is a military town. L.A., you might actually get an audience there.
Exactly.
Right?
You decided to share the town and share the stadium with a team that ended up catching on pretty quickly. And nobody in L.A. is talking about the Chargers. Well... What did I realize I'm saying this about Donald Sterling. What did Donald Sterling do to make the Clippers relevant at the time? He ended up making a splash and signing some players that people were talking about. So, how do you make the Chargers interesting in a town where there's already a very interesting football team? You make a splash, you do something. You sign Colin Kaepernick if you're the Chargers.
I think that makes a ton of sense. I think from a football standpoint, the Ravens make the most sense. There's some controversy about how his girlfriend made it impossible for the Ravens to sign him because she called them racist or whatever. I feel like that's something you can get. If teams keep on signing Brent Grimes despite Miko Grimes being there, I feel like you can get past that. But I think from a marketing standpoint, it's difficult to beat the marginal value that Colin Kaepernick adds to the Chargers. That's thinking, James. That's thinking.
Who's your quarterback? Tyrod Taylor? Really?
Boo. I love Tyrod, but I mean, he's not putting people in seats.
No, he's not. And if you want to be in a position, if you're Colin Kaepernick and you want to be in a position where you could potentially start, or at least end up as the backup, and in case Ty God goes down, you can find yourself playing again. That is, again, you could do a hell of a lot worse, both with the team, both with the makeup of the team, the coach, and the situation. The situation is pretty good for you overall. I don't know if you're going to find a better position throughout the league outside of...
You have a first-round rookie quarterback, so there's that problem. But I mean,
come on, all first round rookie quarterbacks sit for 4 years, right? Green Bay, that's what they do.
That's normal. Yeah, that's normal. I mean, but you could just make it a competition between Tyrod and Colin at the beginning, and kind of weight things in the favor of Colin for business reasons. And then Colin Kaepernick's the bridge quarterback. And if he doesn't work out, now you've got either Tyrod or Justin Herbert if he's ready. And I think by all accounts, most people don't believe Justin Herbert's going to be ready in year one anyway, which is the whole point of having Tyrod on the team. I mean, people have still talked about the Chargers signing Cam Newton despite the fact that they've got Justin Herbert. So yeah, why not make it Colin?
Yeah. He certainly would be. He'd certainly be a hell of a lot cheaper than what Cam Newton's going to end up eventually getting paid wherever he ends up finding himself. That is still a bit of a surprise that he hasn't been signed yet, or at least a bit of a surprise to me anyway. And there was a lot of discussion about Cam Newton and his foot, but is that really why you're not signing Cam Newton?
I am shocked that this has been really weird for a lot of reasons. Jadeveon Clowney hasn't signed with the team. I think there's a report saying that teams basically are like, well, I mean, the offer that we're going to give you is on the table, put up or shut up. So there's that. But yeah, Cam hasn't signed with the team. Obviously, Colin Kaepernick hasn't signed with the team. Everson Griffin hasn't signed with the team. And all of them are super viable to sign with the team. I think we just put out at The Athletic, I think we just put out an all UFA team, like everybody that's currently in free agency. And it's not bad. It was published on the 12th, so about 4 days before we're recording this. Never mind. No, it's an all everybody who's ever hit free agency. This is weird. I don't like it. So, I mean, I love it. It's at The Athletic. Please subscribe. What is this? An all-star team featuring the best NFL players signed as unrestricted free agents. Okay, so this is since Reggie White established unrestricted free agency, and then this is the year after they signed an all contract year team or something like that. This is a very bizarre exercise. I guess most of these players don't hit free agency. That's like the thing, is that if you're good, you won't hit free agency. Whatever. I hate this. I mean, I love it. Please go to The Athletic.
We hope you enjoyed that little descent into madness there. Let's hit the mailbag. The mailbag starts off with Raul asking, does the quote pace and space evolution in basketball dovetail the passing game evolution in football? Do these playing styles reflect a millennial culture shift? If so, how will Generation Z sports be played?
I'll answer the millennial culture shift thing first with like a pretty resounding no. And for that, you kind of only have to look to the people that like design these offenses. Like, do you think like D'Antoni is like a millennial whisperer or something like no, he's just like maybe Steve Kerr, right? But like, for the most part, the people designing these like, get as many shooters on the wing as possible offenses in basketball have been designing it for a while. And people pushing like tempo have like Paul Westhead have been designing it for a while. Like they're not, and I'm not a basketball historian, so maybe everything I'm saying is completely wrong. But in fact, I don't know anything about other sports at all. But I would say that this is not a millennial thing. I think it's just as sports evolve, people get better and better at kind of exploiting the nature of the rules in the sport. And so it took a while for people to fully capture how valuable the 3-point line was after they established the 3-point line. Now, as passing quality has increased, it has become clearer and clearer that one should probably rely on the passing game. In the 1970s, before 1978, when passing rules were liberalized, passing was still probably more important than running, but passing quality wasn't so good that it was very clear that this was the case. And you could very easily make the argument that if you didn't have an all-star quarterback like a Tarkenton or a Staubach, that you should probably just be running the ball, and that might have actually just been the case. So as time has gone on, we've just kind of realized that with higher precision and better passing games, we've got the ability to kind of exploit that more and more. But you take a look at who's designing some of the most advanced passing games in the NFL and what their kind of history is, and you're looking at like Hal Mooney and Norm Chow and Mike Leach, and it's like these guys are like 70. Like it's not a millennial culture shift. It's just kind of a realization of the talent available to us, the talent that's flowing up into the NFL from college and the kind of offenses they're used to, and what has become more effective in the NFL. And if you just chart like passing attempts as a percentage of all plays in football, I mean, it's basically gone up. I wouldn't say in a straight line or anything like that, but it's basically gone up since 1978. And as differences in passing rules have liberalized, say like what was in the mid 2000s, Peyton and Tom Brady complained about some interpretation of the rule, and that made like pass interference like much easier to call, and that liberalized passing. People pass more. So there's like spikes every so often. There's a bunch of quarterback injuries. I think it was 2017. Passing went down just a little bit, but for the most part, I mean, passing has gone up fairly evenly since 1978. this is a product of people realizing that passing is just more efficient and you can design passing. So it's not like a culture shift, and it's not like there's just a totally new revolution in passing that comes from like your Cliff Kingsbury and your Sean McVays. It goes back to people that were designing like your run and shoot offenses way back when, or your air raids, right? So no, I don't think it's a culture shift, but I do think it's a reflection of the fact that it is clear and obvious how much more important passing is now that the quality of the passing game has made it undeniable. Plus, the talent at receiver is strong enough that it makes much more sense to field 3 receivers than 2.
Kyle Sleeby asks, Odenigbo has shown great leadership the past few months, and his progression last year on the field has been extremely exciting. Would bringing Everson Griffin back on even a modest starter salary potentially limit Odenigbo's growth as a starter and a team leader? Or am I overthinking it?
I think it would limit his development, but I think anytime you bring in a good player, you're limiting the development of the players underneath it. The question is just whether it's worth it, and I think it is. And I'm a guy that thinks Odenigbo is a starting quality player and that he should play much more often than he did last year. I called my shot 2 years ago in the preseason when I was like, I think Odenigbo is better than Weatherly. Put that out on the Football Machine podcast, and it got a lot less pushback than I thought, but still got some pushback, and now I feel very comfortable in that. Every time I feel like I make a claim like, hey, I called this, I'm really good at football, I have to like, the Minnesotan in me is like, no, but I'm also wrong a lot, and I should give you an example of how I was wrong very recently. So the good thing is my brain always forgets what I'm wrong about. Oh, yeah, Trey Waynes turned out to be all right, I guess. So that's my mea culpa.
I like how your brain like immediately tries to like hedge a bet, even though you were like right about something. Like, yes, but I mean, don't listen to me too hard, because if you do,
no, I'm not saying I'm smart, even though like my whole job relies on me being confident in my takes. But no, yeah, he's somebody that I've backed up for a while now as somebody that kind of deserves a lot more snaps, but that doesn't mean he should automatically get the job if a better option is available. And while I think Everson Griffin can no longer be an every down guy, I think that he should be used as a kind of a rotational pass rush artist to be used on third downs or critical downs, maybe late in games as teams are attempting a comeback, and you should limit his snap count. I think that, yeah, you would potentially limit Odenigbo, but you should still sign Everson Griffin. So, yeah, I think that real in-game reps matter a lot. I think that when you add a body in defensive line practices and drills, that's at the start of the line in terms of drills, you're hurting the development of the person who's next in line and gets bumped down. That's just what happens, and you have to deal with it, and you have to find a way around it. And maybe you hurt your long-term development, but like the Vikings are not, despite the fact that they like yeeted their entire cornerback core, they're not playing a long game. They've got a very tiny window. Try to win. They just made it into the second round of the playoffs. Sign as many good players and put them in as many good positions as possible. The drawback to that is that your younger players don't get development opportunities, and it's like, yeah, well, that's the game.
Also from Slaby, he asks, idea I had that may never go anywhere. What if positions like linebacker and running back, which have a higher collision rate, counted differently toward the cap? It's not fair that Dalvin gets beat up 40 times a game, but paying him a more fair wage would hurt the team too much.
I love the idea, except how teams might try to manipulate this and move players to running back if it becomes kind of remotely possible, just so that they can pay those players more. I mean, I don't know about linebackers so much, because they seem to actually have reasonable length careers, and I guess they just don't get hit as much as running backs. But like Kendricks makes $10 million a year, like that's fine. And then you'd also, and the problem is the linebacker position designation is broken in the NFL currently, because it includes edge defenders like Von Miller, who like earn $20 million a year, and then off-ball players like Kendricks earn $10 million a year, and both of them are like at the top of their game right now, right? So, I don't know that for linebackers that makes sense for a couple of reasons, but for running backs, I would say if you made a rule that running backs their salary was only 60% counted against the cap, and then their salary explodes. But the alternative is that they still have a shorter career. That would make a ton more sense. I can't imagine any union in the world would like love that idea, and that it wouldn't cause potentially resentment in the locker room or whatever. But like, the running backs take the most punishment, and they matter kind of the least to the game. But I love watching good running backs, and teams still seem to think that they matter, even if they think they matter a lot less than they used to think that. I don't know. I kind of like the idea. I'm sure there's like a bunch of really bad reasons that or a bunch of really good reasons that it's a bad idea, but I can't think of them right now, aside from teams cheating the system. And you can find ways around it because of arbitration. The problem is, I don't know who brings this to arbitration, right? Because like, a running back is not going to be, or a wide receiver that gets switched, like a Tavon Austin's not going to go to the NFL and be like, dude, they're paying me too much. They classified me as a running back, and that's kind of weird. You and I both agree that's weird. And a team's not going to be like, hey, so we manipulated the system, and in retrospect, that was wrong. Like, no one's going to bring this to arbitration. So I guess other teams have to bring it to the NFL arbitration on whether or not a player gets to be categorized as a running back. But I think we would see teams attempt to manipulate that system. So there needs to be something in place that kind of resolves around that. But yeah, I mean, running backs kind of get the short end of the stick. And I would love it if they got paid more and it didn't impact teams' cap strategies all that much.
John Belk has a question for us. John Belk asks, how realistic is the idea of trading Cook before/early in the season, and what kind of return could we expect?
I don't know who would trade for him that didn't attempt to like draft a running back in this last year's draft. Off the top of my head, I can't name like all the running backs in the league right now, but like, the Chiefs, that would have been an interesting trade, but they got a first round running back instead. That's going to be kind of fun to watch to see how he does. Who's in a position to win now that doesn't have a run? I guess the Buccaneers, actually. That would be pretty fascinating, huh? Did they draft anybody at running back? I can't. Let's find out. Let's do a live. Arif fact checks himself on the podcast.
Welcome to another edition of Arif fact checks himself on the podcast. Sponsored by Dots Pretzels. Dots Pretzels, made in North Dakota. Arif, have you fact checked yourself?
Yeah, they got a third round running back. Never mind.
This has been another example. This has been another edition of Arif fact checks himself, sponsored by Dots Pretzels. Dots, please send us money.
Maybe the Steelers? Because they got a fourth round running back, but nobody cares about that. They probably like James Conner, though, so that's probably not it. Houston is always willing to do bad stuff, so maybe Houston.
Can you imagine how many players and like beach houses the Vikings would end up getting? We might even get Reliance Stadium out of that deal.
Yeah, you could. I mean, it's all in the cards, right?
They're going to be playing out in a parking lot somewhere outside of Houston. Like, no, but we have Dalvin Cook now. It's great.
Oh, yeah. Todd Gurley is a Falcon now. That's strange.
Well, yeah.
No, that's a reason not to pay running backs, right? Todd Gurley's a Falcon now. I guess the Cardinals, if they really feel like they're win now.
Yeah.
That sucked because I drafted Eno Benjamin in my Dynasty League, but whatever. That's about it. I mean the Seahawks, right? Because you can always trade a running back to them. But I get the Cardinals are the only team I can think of that would make sense. So yeah, no, I don't think that it's reasonable to trade Dalvin Cook right before the season starts.
No. Nolan asks, what is your best case scenario for the starting cornerback group this season?
I think Holton Hill, Mike Hughes, and I was about to say Jeff Dunham. What? Jeff Gladney.
Wow, that would have been... I don't know how... He's good with his hands, but I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about his feet.
I mean, he probably runs about as well as I do in coverage. Uh, yeah, I don't see that going. Like, if Cameron Dancer starts over Holton Hill, is that like a worst case scenario? Because it means he beat out Holton Hill, who I think is pretty good for a job. That's got to be like a pretty good sign, right? Especially if he's a rookie. So I wouldn't say it's like worst case scenario. Cameron Dancer starts instead of Holton Hill. You might actually just be in a better spot in that case. So I don't know what best case scenario looks like, but I think your best three right now are Jeff Gladney and Holton Hill and Mike Hughes. So yeah, if Neville Clark, UCF undrafted free agent, starts over Mike Hughes, is that a worst case scenario? Probably in most circumstances, but there might be a circumstance where you're just like, yeah, man, he's an interception machine. He intercepted every single one of Kirk Cousins' passes, even on the other side of the field in camp. It's insane. He has to play. Like, yeah, then you just be like, all right, yeah, he should play. Like, I don't know what that looks like. I think the most likely best case scenario is those three. But I think another scenario where somebody else that's not one of those three starting does not necessarily mean you're in a bad spot.
Tim Clark has a question for us. Who is this year's Kari Blasingame, a.k.a. Reef's preseason crush, who will break his heart when he gets cut/sent to the practice squad?
So I was briefly looking up the undrafted free agents, and nobody was standing out to me because if I'm going to have a weird, like, undrafted free agent crush, it can't be like the two players that are like dominantly the best by like the consensus board or whatever, Courtney Davis and Neville Clark. So I'm looking at these other names and I'm like, well, Brady Aiello's athletic and I tend to gravitate towards athletes. That's kind of what was appealing about Kari Blasingame in the first place. And then I was like, who is Dan Chisena? I don't even know how to pronounce his name. And so I Googled him and it turns out he arrived, he redshirted for Penn State football and then quit the team to join their track and field team from 2016 through 2018, won the 2017 Big Ten Outdoor Championship in the 4x400, and also is one of the school record holders for the 4x100 at 39.08. Finished 13th and 9th at NCAA championships in the 2017 outdoor season. So he is a track star, particularly at the middle distances, but also, the 4x100. So he seems to be a super athlete. DraftScout.com has him as running his average time for them is like 4.32 and his projected low is 4.22. He caught 3 passes last year for Penn State. All 3 of them long bombs, I think, and has 4 tackles on special teams. So there is no reason to think that he'll be good. There's every reason to think that he is really fast. He apparently is actually quite a good gunner and shut down some pretty talented returners because of his punt gunning. This sounds like the kind of weird idiosyncratic player that I can attach myself to. So he's super fast. He's good at like an obscure, probably not that important part of the game. I'm sold. And he's like 6'2". He's like not like short or anything.
Well, I'm glad that this question was able to help you figure out the next 3 pieces you put out on The Athletic.
That's right, yeah. Now we just need to be able to figure out how to pronounce his name.
Exactly. Also a question and a message from Bill Botke. To start, I wanted to say how appreciative I've been of The Athletic's coverage of how the death of George Floyd affected Minnesotans and their sports teams. Even though sports is entertainment, changes can be a powerful force for good. You're doing important work, and please keep that momentum going. After that, I almost hate to ask a sports question, but here it goes. So far, there has been little discussion of wide receiver Courtney Davis. He was one of the higher ranked players on the consensus board, when he was signed as a undrafted free agent. Can you say anything about his prospects?
It's like a crowded receiver group. So like he obviously doesn't have to beat out Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen, but he's dealing with Chad Beebe and Olabisi Johnson. He's dealing with Tajay Sharp. And then he's also dealing with like just kind of the rest of the group that's there that kind of fills out the rest of the roster. Drafted KJ Osborne, my new undrafted free agent crush, Dan Chizina, Bones Hollins and Dylan Mitchell, both of whom people expected to make a splash. Hollins actually ended up playing in a couple of games. Dylan Mitchell's another deep threat. And then no one's like upset about having Davion Davis on the roster, who's also pretty highly rated on the consensus board. So it is difficult to see him kind of making the roster, but like the good news is that he's not built like a lot of the other guys on the roster. So if you're looking for somebody who's got a different skill set than Alexander Hollins, then Dylan Mitchell, then Dan Chizina, and so on, he plays more like a big body guy. So he ran a 4.54, so he's not a super fast guy, and he doesn't look like that on tape. But he kind of knows how to use his body. So he's still only 6'1", right? So he's not actually a quote unquote big receiver, but he plays a lot like a big receiver, kind of in the same way people expected Laquan Treadwell to. He's only 6'2", but a lot of people thought he played like a 6'4" guy. The good news is he is not a first round pick, and he also ran faster than Laquan Treadwell. So don't like think of this as like a comparison where you're going to get your hopes like dashed or anything like that. He knows how to reel the ball in from outside of his frame, from inside of his frame. He knows how to box out receivers and stuff like that. And he's actually a fairly decent route runner. He needs to like clean things up and be a little bit more efficient. He needs more economical in his route running, but he's like a fairly decent route runner who has had to deal with a couple of injury problems. But yeah, I mean, he could become kind of a third down kind of reliable guy. Whereas a lot of these other guys, I would argue, just don't have the kind of the box out skill set. I wouldn't say that like Tajay Sharp is that guy, or Chad Beebe is that guy, or even BC Johnson is that guy. And so given that he's got a somewhat unique skill set among this group, I think he's got a chance. But it is kind of like a crowded receiver group for people at his expected skill level, right? Like no one would argue that the Vikings are deep at receiver, but given how talented we expect him to be and how talented the rest of the receiver group is, it'll be difficult for him to stand out.
Next question is from Mike Ellis, who asks, I recently melted part of my Bridgewater, presumably jersey, while making popcorn. No air popper for me, stovetop all the way. Should I get a new jersey or wait until next year when they hopefully go back to when they go to a throwback look? I'm the wrong person to ask because upon examination, discussing earlier, all the jerseys I have are for people who have left the team. So because I haven't picked up a ham. So like I don't know. I curse people. So I curse people and I curse teams. So I don't know. It's kind of like, I would be the wrong person to ask here. Get yourself a fine knockoff of somebody.
It is such a, I don't know. Like, have you melted jerseys by like regular stovetop cooking before? Like, how does this happen? I don't know. Okay. Well, you know what? No judgment. Things happen.
It's the reason why people say that you shouldn't be, at a stovetop or whatever with loose fitting clothing because it could occasionally start on fire. I imagine something like that happened where you were teaching a class telling people not to do this, and then it ended up happening. But remotely because everything's being done remotely. So I bet your YouTube video is hilarious, or your Zoom video.
I like the idea that like it's on a Zoom call and it's like it's on a delay and it stutters and it's pixelated. So like it takes a while to realize the jersey's on fire. It's basically a slideshow of somebody panicking. Okay, so one, I love stovetop popcorn, and it gives you opportunities to make like things like chili crisp popcorn that you can't do in an air popper, and you don't want to add like the chili crisp oil afterwards. Like it's an essential part of the cooking process. So I love that. There's a lot of opportunities there that don't exist for air poppers. So I'll link a recipe from a non-food YouTuber who just happened to. It's one of the guys at Polygon. I forget his name now. That just makes funny videos about video games, and he's like, it's quarantine, I'm going to tell you about my favorite popcorn recipe, and he does it, and it's amazing. He uses Laugan Ma, which I guess is the trendy chili crisp, but you can use whatever chili crisp you want. They're all incredible. As for another jersey, I no longer purchase jerseys because I cover the team and I have to be an objective reporter. But my previous jersey policy was they have to have already left the team, and so it is unlikely that, not impossible, but unlikely that they'll do something that makes me ashamed to wear the jersey. So that's why I got an Alan Page. That's why I got an Antoine Winfield. That's why I got a Jared Allen. That has been a safe policy thus far. So it also means like, and I refuse rookie jerseys unless people are asking for a gift. So my girlfriend has a Bridgewater jersey, for example. We bought rookie year. She actually wanted a Cordell Patterson jersey, and I told her absolutely not. And I called that. That worked out.
Wait! You haven't evened things out. You haven't like said yes, but I was also wrong about this jersey and this jersey.
Yeah, I got a Bridgewater jersry. I was obviously wrong about that. Yeah. But you know, she was like, "Hey, you said this is a great pick. Why can't we just break the rookie rule once?" And I was like, "Well, it's not like a hard and fast rule. I mean, you want a gift, I'll give it to you." But
nonsense. Rules exist for a reason, and that is why. No, you should have stood firm. Like, no, this rule exists for an absolute reason. I buy this. He's going to go. He's going to go far, far away. And he did. And this whole situation, including his knee, is your fault.
I'm going to blame my girlfriend for that one.
You know what? If you're a Vikings fan and you have ill will toward Diggs, get over it. He could still walk into just about any bar in the like tri-state region and get his drinks for free because of what he did for the Saints. The jerseys,
for the Saints.
Well, against the Saints anyway. Really, it just gave them more of like an against me complex, which is all the Saints are really looking for. But beside the point, go to Shields. I just mentioned that because I've been to Shields a lot lately with like bike fixing stuff. There are some remarkable deals on Diggs jerseys right now of every size.
I was about to say, I bet you could get a pretty good deal on them.
You can get a fantastic deal on Diggs jerseys right now. Go for that. Because no matter what, like his like leaving thing felt like, the dude could play, the dude can still ball, and you can find yourself in a situation where maybe a team that he played really well against, you'll find yourself with another player, or like a fan of another team, and be like, "Oh yeah, I remember when he put up like 200 yards on that. Darn shame. Oh, remember the Minneapolis Miracle? God, that was so awesome." Anyway, good to see you, Saints fan, and just like slowly walk away. Fantastic. There's options. Find yourself a Diggs jersey for remarkably cheap, because they produce so many of them now that what the hell are you going to do with them? Next question. Actually, I think that's a decent idea anyway. Next question is from Bombo, who asks, what should the pass rush defensive line package be if we assume Hunter Pierce, Stefan, maybe Odenigbo as the early down guys?
Yeah, so I think the third down of the pass rush package will obviously include Hunter and Odenigbo. I would put Odenigbo at the 3 technique spot, obviously, because like that's something that he's very comfortable with, and I wouldn't say that the Vikings have a known good 3 technique. But I wouldn't put Michael Pierce there because it's a pass rush package. And so the other 3 technique spot I'd probably give to James Lynch, just because having like a defensive end body there, you're probably in a good spot. The real question is what to do at the other defensive end spot. You could go with Anthony Zettel is marked on our lads as a defensive end. I think he's a defensive tackle with the Vikings. You could go with DJ Wanham or Kenny Willekes. You could go with Eddie Yarborough. That's going to be tough to figure out kind of who the other edge rusher is. You could say, hey, it's Anthony Barr, but like that is just like not happened as many times as we've talked about it happening. Maybe it's Anthony Barr. That would be kind of interesting. The Vikings actually end up doing that, and I would keep that idea on the back burner. But I think just because of his draft capital, you probably want to put DJ Wanham there at the other edge spot. And then because Wanham can play inside as well, you've got this opportunity to have a bunch of stunts and twists where like Lynch and Wanham can exchange, or Odenigbo and Wanham can exchange, and you've got the opportunity to create pressure from multiple fronts. So that, I think, is what the pass rush package looks like, with both Odenigbo and Lynch on the inside, and whoever kind of wins the backup edge rusher job, whether it's Wanham or Willekes or somebody else like Eddie Yarborough, on the outside.
Next question is from Duke's Code. Love the fact that became a sentient, like an actual like account here. Duke's
So
Code.
great.
Are the 2020 Buccaneers going to be the 2009 Vikings? Is there anything we need to tell our former NFC Central Division rivals? Don't throw across the body. Try to avoid 12 men on the field, and don't throw across your body in an important spot.
Don't let your quarterback get hit a bunch without anyone knowing. I don't know how you can actually prevent that.
Just stay out of New Orleans, really. Like, just...
I mean, that's tough if you're the Buccaneers. It's going to be a challenge.
Today they announced a whole mess of new COVID cases for people who are working at renovating renovating Mercedes-Benz. So just stay out of there. Just refuse to play in New Orleans.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that would be important. Other than that, yeah, keep track of how many players are in your huddle or about to enter your huddle. I'm going to imagine that Tom Brady is going to be a little bit more kind of diligent about that sort of thing than Brett Favre. You know what? You don't have to use your running back all that much, honestly. As whoever he is, however good he is, when you get to the NFC Championship game, you don't have to. Is all I'm saying.
Nope, just keeping it out of your running back's hands is probably a good idea. Despite how large they are, despite how strong they are, it's best to just not gamble with that sort of fumble luck. Also, from Duke's Code, assuming the season continues without a hitch, who starts the game at quarterback sooner, Jordan Love or Jalen Hurts? Also, assume I made a witty Love Hurts comment.
All right, I've made that assumption.
Done.
How clever of you.
Love Hurts.
I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts just because Carson Wentz is more injury prone, seemingly, than Aaron Rodgers. And also, I bet it's easier to bench Carson Wentz than Aaron Rodgers.
Much. Way, like, you're just not getting you're not getting a Christmas card if you do that to Aaron Rodgers. Like, it's you're
You're right.
He has stopped talking to people for way less than that. Finally, from Duke's Code, which league is handling the 2020 season the best? It might be more fun to go with who's handling it the worst.
Yeah.
I don't
think the NBA is handling it poorly, so I think you just have to go with baseball. I don't think the NBA is handling it well, but it's funny, so I'm appreciating the fact that everyone's like holed up in Disney World for some reason.
Like, they're all splintering off too, and specific star players are like, no, we shouldn't be playing at all. We should be we shouldn't be playing as the distraction. We should let we as a game will be the distraction from the discussion that's going on. We should be away from it, which is an interesting take to be sure, but it appears to be the minority view of the players. So it's kind of fun to watch the NFL. Or watch the NBA, rather, try to figure out what the hell they're doing. Baseball is doing it the worst, it would appear, followed closely by, well, the NHL keeps trying, but I have no reason to believe the NHL is actually going to finish up this year. Like, that's there were talks about doing something in March and April in different spots, and that fizzled out, and it just kept going, and now we're in the middle of June. And it seems less and less likely as time goes on.
Summer hockey, boys. Who could ask for anything more?
Hey, listen, June hockey tends to be amazing. Also, it only happens to be 2 teams playing in June, and they're the best in the league. So it doesn't really work that way when you have 22, 28 teams playing at the same time in June. It's just not very good. I'll add another group to the list of people that are not doing it well. Apparently, the WWE, who we've talked about on the show before as to how they were handling their no people in person for their shows thing, and how well that was going. Not only have they had now 2 positive COVID cases at their performance center where they do the recordings, but they are now, but they put out a rule saying if you're going to be they started to allow a few fans to come in along with the developmental wrestlers they have in the background, and they put out a rule saying you cannot wear a mask if you're in there because of how it will look on TV. So I feel like if you're looking at how to not do things, that's probably picture perfect. And they hadn't tested anybody on their squad the entire time that they were doing this. Like they hadn't actually given a full like an actual test. And this isn't just like reporting from some random like website. This is coming from like actual people who like cover this for a living. And they're going, wow, what the hell is going on here? So if you're looking for the worst, those are probably your examples. I still am amazed and am captivated by Korean baseball. So I suppose my answer has to be Korean baseball. But apparently New Zealand rugby is amazing right now because they have, 40,000 people in the stands because they don't have coronavirus cases happening in New Zealand now.
Yeah, that's true. What was somebody like pointing out, like, this is the reward for good behavior, you get sports now?
No, that's not the case at all. I refuse to believe that's what's actually going on. That's what you get for living on an island that is increasingly difficult to get infected in the game pandemic. Like this is you can
yeah. That's what I was saying. Like New Zealand is notoriously difficult to infect.
Yeah, be like that and Iceland and Madagascar. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Madagascar.
That's what you're doing.
Sometimes I would like reload the game until I got to start in Madagascar because I was like, I can't handle this.
Yes. Like I will start infecting people through boat. That's just what we're going to do today. Kenneth Allen asks, what is the realistic best case scenario for Cook, assuming they're going to screw this up and sign him to a big deal? Is it 10 million?
I mean, best case is 8 million, right? Because that's what the Vikings want. But I do think that that's realistic, right? Because they can put a ton of pressure on Cook, like we talked about. Plus, they can look at the history of running back deals and say, "Man, I don't know if you want to be in this category." And for those who missed it, on the football machine, I went over every running back who signed a deal in the last 4 years that consumed at least 4% of the cap. Quick rundown in no particular order, actually. DeMarco Murray with Philadelphia, Jerick McKinnon with San Francisco, Lamar Miller with Houston, Le'Veon Bell with the New York Jets, David Johnson with Arizona, Doug Martin with Tampa Bay, Devonta Freeman with Atlanta, Todd Gurley with the Rams, Jonathan Stewart with Carolina, and Ezekiel Elliott with Dallas. And if you paid close attention, only one of those might work out, and that's the Ezekiel Elliott one. We can only say that because we're 1 year into the contract.
Yeah, that's the only one we're not doing like hindsight on. Everybody else was just absolute crap.
Yeah, just wait. These are all disasters. This is like remarkable. So no one's happy except the Cowboys. And I feel like, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? I feel like a 10% chance of being happy 1 year into the contract is like not ideal. And I think the Vikings can use that history against Cook in these negotiations. So I think it is possible. I think it is realistic that they could get to 8 million. But I do think 10 million might be the most likely optimistic outcome. And in fact, it might be the most likely outcome. I estimated previously that Cook would end up signing for about 12 million a year, which is about 1 million less than Cook's purported asking price. So it seems like the Vikings are closer to how I would value his running back contract, which is something like 5 million, because I'd evaluate a top running back at 6, and are offering him 8, right? And it seems like they're closer to that in terms of true running back value. And Dalvin Cook's team has looked at contracts the way I evaluated with them, which was an assumption that running backs are important, and then taking a look at running back deals and what you can get away with. And I don't think he can get away with $15 or $16 million a year based off of his history, but I think he can make the point that he is an elite running back. And so, or at least a very, very good top tier running back, if you don't want to use the word elite. And so I expected 12 million, but I do think that 10 million is the most likely optimistic scenario. I just do think it is realistic for the Vikings to get 8.
Also from Kenneth Allen, he asks, how are you doing now that Bon Appetit has gone dark?
I consume so much YouTube that the other subscriptions just kind of filled in. And so, yeah, now I don't have Gourmet Makes and I'm sad, but only kind of, because now I just watch, I don't know, League of Legends or whatever. It doesn't matter. I consume the worst stuff on YouTube. So
wow,
I'll watch whatever.
I've managed to go down a dark hole of Top Gear, the TV show before it went American, and have just been plowing through that on Prime and YouTube clips and whatever. And the wife and I have watched.
Like, despite what I think of the hosts, I mean, it is an insanely entertaining show.
It is, and
it's so funny.
There's, it can be formulaic as hell, but it still can be pretty entertaining. So, but yeah, I've been doing a lot of that. It is odd to me that of all things to like, I say get canceled, of all things to kind of get put into rough shape during the quarantine and everything, Bon Appetit would not have been in the top 20 places that would have had a workplace, like a worker rebellion. It turns out that you should pay people who appear on your videos, especially if they appear to be the only person in the kitchen who can temper chocolate.
Yeah. Probably pay that person. And it seems like this has become a central feature of so many episodes. The fact that one would need to temper chocolate. Maybe make the tempering chocolate expert a high paid position.
As it turns out, anyway. Kyle Segal asks, "How was lunch?"
It was fine. I had a Wendy's chicken sandwich.
Really? Spicy or just just a general one?
I always get spicy.
That is crazy. We had the same lunch today. I went without mayo because that's my brand on the sandwich, but I also got the chicken apple like salad as well because I can trick myself. Well, yeah, I can trick myself. The way you're supposed to like attack a day as far as like losing weight is concerned is you're supposed to like load up in the early part of the day, and then as the day goes on, you're supposed to be eating much less. So I'm trying to lose weight, and I'm trying to do that aspect of things. And so like my breakfast and lunch have been interesting, way larger than they have any like right to be. So yeah, we had the same lunch. That's partially the same lunch. That's kind of disturbing. There was a question about from Delta BC Dad about if my takes are wrong about all dressed chips, and I don't know if you've ever had all dressed chips.
I don't think I have. So
they are fantastic. They are so good. I will pack them in my bag in Seattle and take that instead of equipment. They are fantastic. Also, ketchup chips are trash, and I'm sorry to our Canadian listeners who enjoy ketchup chips, but I just can't.
Yeah, I saw this like thing about ketchup chips like years ago on YouTube, no less, and I was like, man, people are really freaking out about how good ketchup chips are. I should find a way to get them. And it's actually not that difficult to get them in Minnesota, given how close Canada is. So I had them shipped.
Even as close as Little Canada is to Minneapolis.
Right. I don't know if that matters. But but yeah, they're whatever. They're not even that good. Like, I wouldn't even say they're whatever. They're like not that good.
No.
So also, apparently all dressed chips are different in France than in Canada. What's going on? Oh, there's a USA all dressed chip? I've never heard of that. I thought they were only Canadian.
Well, it's I say there's controversy, but all dressed chips from Canada are fantastic, and the ones in the US are pretty good as well. Just throwing that out there. It was almost worth potentially going over the border when we were in Seattle to do it. I like saying that, potentially going over the border while in Canada. Meanwhile, I'm like an hour and a half from the border here. You just can't go through it right now. So Alec asks 2 questions. He says, what is your best guess for how many more years Kirk Cousins will be the Vikings quarterback? 31 years old, currently signed through 2022.
I think he will be the Vikings quarterback until 2023, I guess. I think he'll play out the 2022 contract, because if you don't, you have a $40 million cap hit in 2021 just because of the nature of the guarantees on his contract. So it would be extremely difficult to cut him and probably not worth it. And if you don't like him, he can be a bridge quarterback to whatever rookie that you do like. So, but I don't think that he'll have proven his worth in an all-in kind of way after 3 more years of play. And so I think that he won't continue to be the quarterback after 2022. So I think he'll play out the life of his contract for the Vikings, and that's it. And then he'll sign somewhere else for a lot of money, and he'll be happy about that.
The second question that he has is about burgers. He says, build the best burger possible using only one choice from each of the following categories: cheese, condiment, and topping.
Only one choice is kind of difficult, but I really like Munster cheese on burgers, so I'm going to do that. I'm not thinking about so Dusty would probably think about this just in terms of the total package and be able to get all of these things to complement each other really well. I'm not really doing that. Maybe I should get a smoked Gouda instead. I don't know, but I'm getting Munster. I'm getting red onion slices, so the long orbital slices, and like a brown kind of whole grain mustard. Those are my toppings. I could be convinced to go with like mayo or a mayo mustard mix, but I think given how few condiments I have available to me, I want to kind of maximize the flavor, and the spiciness of mustard kind of adds a different hit that these others don't.
So I guess my counter to all of that is I had, I think it was last year sometime, I was watching an old episode of Binging with Babish where he was doing episodes where he was doing SpongeBob stuff. And one of them was the one where he builds like the giant order for the guy. But he also ended up making the second Bubble Bass order, which was this bizarre mix of ingredients, and believe the cheese was like Ace Hyuta or something like that, which was referred to as like this snobby cheese, whatever, and wasn't exactly cheap to get on Amazon. But I was curious and wanted to taste it. I was like, okay, this will be interesting, and it was.
That's the one that's on toast, right? Like
yes.
It's on.
Yep, Texas toast. Yep. So it was like that, and I was like, okay, well that's delicious. And then the condiment, I went out of my way and ended up making the like Himalayan ketchup thing. And that was surprisingly amazing. So I ended up doing that. And then the topping was that ended up being like the I suppose that's the condiment. The topping, I would just do some like just simple like jammy onions, just kind of bring those down a bit and have that on an 80-20 for the meat. And I really enjoyed that quite a bit. That was a bit surprising. I've also done almost like a burger with like a balsamic vinegar stuff on it that was like really good too. Like the tomato, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's like the tomato and like basil mixture with the balsamic vinegar in it, and I cannot think for the life of me what that's called. But I've done that with like mozzarella, and that was really good too. So also an option. Ricardo asks the question, good day, sirs. Who would win in a fight, you guys or Collar and Cronin? Follow up, what would your preferred rules be? I'm assuming casket match, so James gets home field advantage of sorts. Follow up to the follow up, what happens first? James's back gives out, or James becomes so full of Hulk-esque rage that he swings Arif like a bat. Perhaps one causes the other.
So if James picks me up and uses me like a bat, I cannot figure out a scenario in which we lose.
I mean,
so there's that. I would argue that Collar and Cronin are in better shape than us, but unless people are the same amount of crazy and have the same amount of skill, that often does not matter in fights. So it matters if like you're in an MMA fight, right? But like if you just play dirty and you're willing to play dirty and you've got like burst energy, you could probably win. So I'm going to give it to us. I'm going to say that James can take a beating despite the state of his back, which I guess has gotten worse. I don't know.
I mean, I'm biking daily. I'm training like a Rocky movie thing, albeit slowly and with a bunch of ice afterwards. But yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah, but I think actually Courtney's the bigger issue between her and Collar. We'd have to take her down first, which is probably poor optics, but is necessary for the nature of the fight. And then we'd have to turn on Collar.
Yeah, that works, and I think a casket match is probably the best idea. Simply, but I don't know about a tag team casket match. I'd have to do some Googling to see if that's actually been done before, because that'd be difficult because the point is you have to put them in there and they have to stay in there, or you have to put both of them in there at the same time. Maybe there's some options there. Don from Ohio asks, should we male pet owners be allowed to celebrate Father's Day since animals are technically dependent on us like a parent?
The answer is no. Don't be weird. Also, someone linked on there's a Pet Parents Day, I guess.
Yep, in April, very last weekend of April or something like that.
Oh yeah, well that's right in between Mother's Day and Father's Day, right? Yeah, that's how time works. Great. Cool. Yeah, I figured out in what direction the months go.
Again, patreon.com/Norse Code for this and additional content.
Actually, it turns out I'm wrong. That's phenomenal. Good job, Arif. April comes before May. Yeah, okay, so yeah, it comes first. Yeah, that's even better. It comes first. Yeah, no, you can't celebrate Father's Day because you have a pet. That's ridiculous.
Fur babies are not babies. I'm sorry.
Yeah, not humans.
Also, from Don from Ohio, if Arif started an OnlyFans account, what would be some of the provocative items he would put on there? Nolan replied, lemons and mesh tops, no doubt. And Ryan says, furthermore, does the Patreon membership give you free access to this material? I have a feeling that is much more like the relationship that Patreon and The Athletic have, in that we're promoting two separate things here. You can get the content from one in one spot and the content in the other in the other. I'm not going to start putting your OnlyFans.
If I started an OnlyFans, it would have to be exclusive, because otherwise why would people pay for the OnlyFans, right?
Exactly.
I can't just put it on the Patreon, otherwise people will pay what they want instead of the subscription price I set on OnlyFans.
Which would have to be substantial.
Right, yeah, obviously.
Let us be clear. My thought was because I have time in my life to think about these things. My thought was, oh well, you'd put putting oil in your beard. That's the only thing I can think of.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, actually, that should be the feature of the OnlyFans. But then also like the takes that I'm sometimes like, I shouldn't put that on a podcast. Mm-hmm. That's where the OnlyFans steps in, where I'm like, you know what? I don't think Adam Thielen was all that useful in the overtime game against New Orleans where he caught the game-winning pass. He was not net useful in that game. Like those takes. Yeah, the takes that are just like, I should probably workshop this or think it through. No, never mind. I'm gonna oil my beard and throw up an OnlyFans.
God, yeah, that's just that's a bit much. That would be the place where you could find the uncensored Arif after dark.
Arif after dark.
So, in the spirit of this, I had a funny thought that about this, not about necessarily you having an OnlyFans. That's terrifying, quite frankly, and I don't think anyone should really have that. But congratulations, you're ruining OnlyFans for everyone. But there is something
that was inevitable.
Wow, you knew what this was. But I wanted to send something to you, and apparently my phone is being a bit annoying. I'm trying one more time to do something here. Did it work? Maybe. Kind of. Yes. All right. So I wanted to show you something that is related to this discussion a bit. So my wife is going a bit, I say going a bit stir crazy. Everyone appears to be kind of losing their minds as far as the quarantine goes, and like everyone's spending so much time at home, and as a result, people are doing like redecorating of their home and all that. So I sent you a video, and I hope that plays here in just a moment, because I think it says it's still sending. So we decided, or she decided, that what we needed to do was convert our kitchen into an inside joke. And I think it works rather well. And until one of the kids is old enough to Google this, it's going to be funny for us. So she converted the kitchen into sweet lemony lemons.
Oh my God!
It's actually even better now. It's actually even better now. There's actually more stuff that was put up since I took that video a couple of weeks ago. So we have converted the kitchen, or she has converted the kitchen into a sweet lemony lemon paradise. And every once in a while, we'll be sitting in the bedroom and we'll go. It's been 10 seconds since we looked at our kitchen.
Let's check on our beautiful lemon tree.
Exactly. So. We actually have lemon curtains now too. It's amazing. So that's what we have going on in our lives. We don't have an OnlyFans, but we do have a sweet lemony lemons themed kitchen. And really, I feel like that's even better than Arif having an OnlyFans account. That is going to be it for the episode. Arif, what do you have to plug?
Well, Chad Graff and I are doing a 10 questions about the Vikings series. I believe we're 8 questions in. I don't know. I've just been responding to Chad's prompts, and I assume at some point we'll finish. I don't know. Maybe it's an infinite series. But that's up at The Athletic. We just covered like how to replace Everson Griffin and what is the strength of the team. And we're currently writing up what is the weakness of the team. Or the biggest weakness of the team. So biggest strength, biggest weakness. So that's over at The Athletic. You can check that out. I also wrote about the Vikings and their approach to systemic racism and how they're reacting to the George Floyd stuff. And then at my politics podcast, which has been like pretty active recently, we just posted an episode about the whole thing, about all the George Floyd stuff and policing and stuff like that, with like a 20,000 word show notes to accompany it, which is basically just an essay about all the things that we talked about. And our next episode is going to be about like statues and stuff, which people seem keen on either removing or not removing. I think it would not be difficult to figure out kind of where we stand when it comes to the question of a lot of these statues. But we'll hope to have a respectful and engaging discussion about it.
All right, so that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. We want to thank you guys so much for listening. And we will be wrapped up here. Hopefully we'll be back in about 2 weeks or so. But until then, for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember to always bring your wine towel. And we will see you soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.